Despite its reputation, and fearsome reputation in American history, the British Army was one that had a complicated relationship in its home country. Since the end of the 17th century, the British had always been very cautious about the military because in the late 17th century, Oliver Cromwell had used the army to dissolve Parliament. From that point on, there was always a very clear parliamentary control of the funding for the army, which, beyond a general anxiety about the army's ability to suppress the people, kept the British Army relatively small by European standards. Now, that being said, the British Army was still quite competent. And by the time of the American Revolution, that army, although small, was deployed to a vast swath of the globe covering the broad British Empire. The largest parts of the army were typically concentrated in the British Isles, in England, to a certain extent Scotland, and especially in Ireland. But British troops were also deployed across North America, from East and West Florida, all the way to what are today the Canadian Maritime provinces, throughout the West Indies, West Africa, even in India. And it was this army that would ultimately consolidate to fight the Americans during our War for Independence. More and more troops being sent to North America, and eventually the authorization of increased recruitment and new regiments within the British Army to meet the threat from the American War, and as well the hiring of auxiliary troops in the form of Germans that we have explored elsewhere in this exhibit. Over that time period, the British Army remained a volunteer force. That is, people willingly entered the British military. There were a couple attempts to coerce soldiers to join, but they were very limited in their scope and didn't last very long in the grand scheme of things, unlike the Navy, in which impressment was allowed. So the British Army remained a highly significant and motivated, powerful force. Over the course of the American War for Independence, they won the majority of engagements they were involved in. And the American victory in the war was not just because they beat the Redcoats, but ultimately outlasted them in what became a global contest against a variety of enemies, not just here in North America, but across the entire globe.